The day was perfect. Blue skies, gentle breeze, the quad filled with proud families. I watched my daughter Emily walk across the stage, her honors cord swinging with each confident step. My baby girl, now a college graduate. My chest swelled with a pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. "She's amazing," I whispered to Mark, my husband of 23 years. He didn't respond. He hadn't said much all morning. After the ceremony, we pushed through the crowd to find Emily. When we finally reached her, she threw her arms around me, then her father. I snapped pictures, trying to capture every moment of her joy. "Claire," Mark said suddenly, his voice oddly formal. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" I followed him to a quiet spot beneath an oak tree, still smiling, still riding the high of the day. "This couldn't wait any longer," he said, reaching into his jacket. That's when he handed me the envelope. Plain, white, my name written in his familiar handwriting. I opened it, confused. The first words jumped out at me. "Petition for divorce." "You're serving me divorce papers?" "Today?" My voice was barely a whisper. Mark's face showed nothing, no remorse, no emotion at all. "I couldn't wait any longer," he said, checking his watch. "I've been planning this for months." I stood frozen, the papers trembling in my hands as cheers and laughter continued around us. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the divorce papers. Mark had gone downstairs after our forced family dinner, where he'd acted as if nothing had happened. Emily didn't know yet. I couldn't bring myself to ruin her graduation day. I heard Mark's laugh drift up from his study, loud, carefree. The sound of it cut through me. 23 years of marriage, and he could laugh like that hours after handing me divorce papers. The next morning, Emily wanted graduation photos in the backyard. I put on makeup to hide my sleepless night and practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror until it looked almost believable. "Mom, stand closer to Dad," Emily directed, adjusting her camera. I moved beside Mark, who draped his arm casually around my shoulders as if he hadn't just shattered our life together. His smile was flawless. Mine felt like broken glass on my face. That evening, I overheard him on the phone in his study. "It's done," he said to someone, his voice warm and intimate. She didn't even fight it, just stood there like a deer in headlights. Laughter again. That same carefree sound. "I'll be free soon," he continued. "Just have to get through a few more weeks of this charade." I backed away from the door, my hand pressed against my mouth to keep from making a sound. He was still living at home, cold, smug, and calculating. 3 days passed. Mark continued his performance of normalcy, leaving for work each morning with a casual "see you tonight," as if he hadn't just demolished our marriage. Emily was busy with post-graduation celebrations, oblivious to the growing tension. I needed to find Emily's passport for her upcoming graduation trip with friends. I searched through our home office, opening rarely used drawers. That's when I found it. A leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. Mark's initials were embossed on the cover. I knew I shouldn't look, but something pulled me toward it, perhaps the need to understand why my life had suddenly imploded. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Rachel. Some dated back nearly 2 years. With trembling hands, I read one dated 6 months ago. "Rachel, I've been thinking about what you said. You're right, I've been comfortable with Claire for too long. She's reliable, predictable, like wallpaper. You don't really notice wallpaper, do you? Not until you decide to renovate. And I'm ready for that renovation." The accountant confirmed what I suspected. I can protect most of my assets. Claire won't see it coming. She still thinks we're happy. I sank to the floor, the journal clutched against my chest. This wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated, planned. A cold-blooded exit strategy. That night, Mark came home with takeout, Emily's favorite. He set the table, poured wine, and chatted about his day as if nothing was wrong. As if he hadn't written those horrible words about me. "Dad, you seem really upbeat lately," Emily commented, helping herself to another spring roll. "Just feeling good about life," Mark replied, shooting me a sidelong glance. "Sometimes you realize what you really want, and it feels good to finally go after it." I watched him across the table, stunned by his performance. The easy smile, the relaxed posture, the attentive father act, all while knowing what he had done, what he was still doing. "How was your day, Claire?" he asked, his voice neutral, his eyes challenging. He wanted me to break first, to scream, to cry, to expose the ugly truth in front of our daughter. He wanted me to be the bad guy. Fine, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Just fine. After dinner, I washed dishes while Mark and Emily watched a movie. Through the doorway, I could see him with his arm around our daughter, both laughing at something on screen. The perfect father. The devoted husband. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. I wouldn't give him what he wanted. I wouldn't break. Not yet. Not like this. For the next week, I read more of Mark's letters when he was at work. Each one revealed more of his plan. Rachel wasn't just a fling, she was the woman he intended to start over with. They had been seeing each other for almost 2 years. I've been careful with the finances, one letter read, moving things around slowly so Claire won't notice. When I finally tell her, she'll get just enough that she can't claim I left her with nothing. But the bulk of it, the important investments, the properties, those will be secured. You and I can start fresh, without her hanging around our necks like a stone. I sat in our closet, surrounded by his expensive suits and my modest clothing, reading his words over and over. I wasn't just being left, I was being replaced. Erased. As if 2 decades of marriage could be wiped away like an inconvenient stain. Something shifted inside me. The shock and grief began to harden into something else. Something with edges. I knew what Mark expected. He expected tears, begging, maybe anger. He expected me to fall apart so he could tell everyone I was unstable, emotional, impossible to live with. He was counting on my pain to make his exit easier. Instead of confronting him, I put the journal back exactly where I'd found it. Then I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Claire? Is that really you? Sarah's voice came through the phone, surprised but warm. It's me, I said quietly, sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot. I need your help. Sarah had been my roommate in college. Now she was one of the most respected divorce attorneys in the city. Years ago, I had helped her leave an abusive husband, letting her stay with us until she found her footing again. We met at a cafe far from my neighborhood. I brought copies of some of Mark's letters, bank statements I'd found, and the divorce papers. He's playing his game in the open, I told her, after explaining everything. So I'll play mine in the dark. Sarah reviewed the documents, her expression growing grimmer with each page. Claire, this is calculated. He's been moving money around for months. She looked up at me. But he's made mistakes, big ones. What kind of mistakes? The kind that judges don't look kindly upon. Financial manipulation, hidden assets. She tapped the papers. And these letters are damning. They show intent. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I got through my nightmare because of you. Now I'm going to help you through yours. For the first time since receiving those divorce papers, I felt something like hope. Sarah worked quickly, digging into our financial history. 3 days later, she called me into her office. I found something, she said, sliding a document across her desk. It's from when you and Mark bought the commercial property for his business expansion 5 years ago. I remembered vaguely signing papers, but Mark had handled most of it. The business had always been his thing, even though our marriage had funded its early days. There's a clause here, Sarah said, pointing to a paragraph buried in legal jargon. It gives you controlling interest in case of certain events, including divorce proceedings initiated by either party. I stared at her. What does that mean exactly? It means you have legal authority over the business assets until final dissolution of the marriage. Sarah smiled grimly. Mark signed this without reading it carefully. The lawyer who drafted it was protecting both parties, but Mark was in a hurry that day. I remember, I said slowly. He was rushing to catch a flight, to meet with investors, he said. Sarah nodded. Well, his rush just gave us leverage. He can't touch those business assets without your approval now. I thought about all the times Mark had dismissed my questions about our finances, telling me not to worry my pretty little head about complicated business matters. What do we do now? I asked. We prepare, we document, and we wait for him to make his next move. 2 weeks after graduation, I finally told Emily about the divorce. We sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of her youth, trophies, photos, stuffed animals she couldn't bear to part with. Dad did what? Her voice cracked. At my graduation? I nodded, keeping my voice steady. I didn't want to tell you that day. It was your moment. Emily paced the room, her face flushing with anger. How could he do this? How long have you known? Since that day. She stopped and stared at me. And you haven't done anything. Mom, he's walking all over you. You need to fight back. I took her hands in mine. Emily, I need you to trust me. I am doing something, just not what he expects. She pulled away, frustrated. He's been awful lately, so smug, making comments about new beginnings. Now I understand why. Tears filled her eyes. He's tearing our family apart, and you're just accepting it. I wanted to tell her everything, about Rachel, about the money, about Sarah and our plan. But the less she knew, the better. Mark couldn't suspect I was doing anything but crumbling. Sometimes the strongest move isn't the most obvious one, I said finally. She looked at me with disappointment, not understanding. Not yet. I love you, I told her. And no matter what happens between your father and me, that will never change. The following weekend, Mark announced he was going on a business trip. Investor retreat in Palm Springs, he explained over breakfast, not looking up from his phone. I'll be gone 4 days. When do you leave? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Tomorrow morning, early flight. He glanced at me then, perhaps surprised by my lack of reaction. After he left for work, I logged into our shared credit card account, one he apparently forgot I had access to. There it was, a reservation at the Oasis Resort in Palm Springs. Suite with a king bed, champagne service, couples massage. Business trip indeed. I forwarded the confirmation email to Sarah, along with screenshots of the charges. Another piece of evidence. That night, I packed Mark's suitcase while he was in his study. I folded his clothes with the same care I always had. I added his toiletries, his phone charger. I even tucked in a note wishing him a productive trip. When he came to bed, he seemed surprised to find his suitcase ready. I thought I'd help, I said simply. I know these investor meetings are important. He studied me for a moment, perhaps trying to detect sarcasm or anger. Finding none, he nodded. Thanks, he said, sounding almost uncertain. I smiled and turned off my bedside lamp. In the darkness, I let myself imagine the scene playing out in Palm Springs, Mark and Rachel, celebrating what they thought was their cleverly orchestrated victory. They had no idea what was coming. While Mark was away, I drove to his office downtown. I'd only been there a handful of times in recent years. He'd always kept his work life separate. Now I understood why. I walked in confidently, nodding to the receptionist. Mrs. Lawson, what a surprise, she said cheerfully. Mark's not in today. He's at that investor retreat. I know, I replied with a practiced smile. I just needed to pick up some financial documents for our tax filing. She nodded and buzzed me through to Mark's office. As his wife, no one questioned my presence. In his office, I began reviewing files, properly, legally, as a business partner with controlling interest. I found what I was looking for in the expense reports. Business lunches with R. Miller, dating back 18 months, hotel charges, gifts coded as client appreciation. As I was finishing, the receptionist popped her head in. Did you find what you needed? Rachel usually handles the financial documentation, but she's out today too. I froze. Rachel? Rachel Miller, our CFO. She's been with the company about 2 years now. Honestly, she's transformed our accounting systems. I maintained my smile with effort. Yes, Mark has mentioned her work. Very dedicated, apparently. Oh yes, the receptionist nodded. They work late all the time. Very committed. I thanked her and left with copies of the records I needed. Now I had proof of financial misuse, company funds spent on the affair, and I had a name and position for Rachel. The case was forming, piece by piece. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same Claire, making dinner, maintaining the house, responding to Mark's increasingly cold treatment with quiet dignity. But every moment he was away, I was building my case with Sarah. I compiled evidence, the letters, financial records, hotel receipts, conversations with company employees who innocently confirmed details of Mark and Rachel's working relationship. You're not unraveling, Sarah observed during one of our meetings. Most clients I see in your position can barely function. I paused in my methodical organization of documents. I'm not just surviving this, I said slowly. I'm rebuilding myself, one piece at a time. And it was true. Each day I felt less like the woman Mark had dismissed as wallpaper, and more like someone new, someone with edges and purpose, someone who wouldn't be erased. At home, Mark grew increasingly bold. He came home late without explanations. He took phone calls behind closed doors. He made vague comments about changes coming soon in front of Emily, who would shoot me worried glances. I said little, watching and noting every careless word, every slip. His cockiness was making him sloppy. Each mistake became another piece of evidence. "Don't worry about me, Emily," I told my daughter when she expressed concern. "Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully." 1 month after serving me divorce papers, Mark began leaving his laptop open around the house, almost daring me to look. I never touched it. I didn't need to anymore. "The mediation date is set," he announced over dinner one night, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. 2 weeks from Tuesday. I assume you've found representation?" "I have," I replied, continuing to eat my salad. He seemed disappointed by my calm response. "My lawyer wants to meet with yours beforehand, to make this as painless as possible." Emily, who was visiting for the weekend, slammed her fork down. "Why are you acting like this is some business transaction? This is your marriage, Dad." Mark had the audacity to look wounded. "Emily, honey, sometimes adults grow apart. Your mother and I don't," I interrupted quietly. "Don't pretend this was mutual." He stared at me, surprised by my interruption. It was one of the few times I'd directly challenged him since receiving the divorce papers. "Fine," he said, his mask slipping to reveal irritation. "Think what you want. It doesn't change anything." "No," I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "It doesn't." Later, I overheard him on the phone, his voice low but clearly annoyed. "She's too calm. Something's off. No, I don't think she knows about us. She's not that clever." I smiled to myself as I walked away. Every time he underestimated me, my advantage grew. As the mediation date approached, Sarah discovered something that changed everything. "Offshore accounts," she said, spreading documents across her desk. 3 of them, set up 16 months ago. He's been transferring money, small amounts at first, then larger sums as recently as last week. I studied the papers. The accounts were in the Cayman Islands, all under company names I didn't recognize. "How did you find these?" I asked. "I have a forensic accountant friend who specializes in exactly this kind of thing," Sarah explained. "He found transfers from your joint accounts to the business, then from the business to these offshore entities." She pointed to a name on one of the documents. Rachel Miller was listed as a secondary account holder. "Mark wasn't just leaving you," Sarah said gently. "He was building a second life with her." I thought about the 23 years I'd given to our marriage, the sacrifices I'd made for his career, the times I'd put my own ambitions on hold. "Can we prove he did this deliberately to hide assets from the divorce?" I asked. Sarah nodded. "That's exactly what we can prove. And judges don't look kindly on hiding assets. It's fraud." That night, I moved some of my clothes into the guest house behind our home. Not everything, just enough for a few days. A small step toward independence, but it felt monumental. With Sarah's guidance, I made a strategic move. Using the controlling interest clause we'd discovered, I legally removed Mark as a signatory from 2 of the business accounts, the operating account and the reserve fund. I didn't touch the money. I didn't transfer anything. I simply removed his ability to do so without my consent. It took 3 days for him to discover it. I was in the kitchen when he stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, waving his phone in my face. "The bank says I need your signature to access the business accounts." I continued chopping vegetables for dinner. "Yes, that's correct." "You can't do that," he sputtered. "That's my business." "Actually," I said calmly, "if you review the ownership documents, you'll find that I have controlling interest until our divorce is finalized. It was in the papers you signed 5 years ago." He stared at me, genuinely shocked. This wasn't part of his plan. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice dropping dangerously. "Are you trying to sabotage me?" "I'm protecting what's legally mine," I replied. "I haven't taken anything. I've simply ensured nothing disappears before mediation." "You think you're so clever," he spat. "This won't change anything." I looked up from my cutting board. "Perhaps not, but it means we'll be entering mediation on more equal footing than you planned." He stormed out, slamming the door. 20 minutes later, I heard his car peel out of the driveway. For the first time in weeks, I smiled a genuine smile. The weekend before mediation, I officially moved into the guest house. It was small but comfortable. A bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and sitting area. Most importantly, it was mine. A space Mark couldn't enter without permission. He noticed my absence that evening when he returned from wherever he'd been all day. He found me in the main house, collecting some books. "You're moving out?" he asked, seeming almost pleased. "Finally accepting reality?" "Just creating some healthy separation," I replied. He scoffed. "A bit dramatic, don't you think? The silent treatment, moving out. You're acting like I betrayed you." The casualness with which he dismissed everything, our marriage, his affair, his financial deception, made something snap inside me. "Didn't you?" I asked quietly. "Come on, Claire," he said with exaggerated patience. "Marriages end. People move on. You're being cold and unreasonable." I nearly laughed at the irony. For weeks he'd been the cold one, calculating, manipulating, lying. Now he was trying to paint me as the villain. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, gathering my books. "I'll see you at mediation on Tuesday." As I walked toward the door, he called after me. "This doesn't change anything, you know. I'm still getting what I want in the end." I paused, turning to look at him. Really look at him. The handsome face I'd loved for so many years now seemed like a mask. For the first time, I saw the man he'd always been, selfish, entitled, calculating. "We'll see," I said simply, and closed the door behind me. Tuesday arrived. Mediation day. I dressed carefully in a simple gray suit, professional, dignified, unmemorable. I pulled my hair back in a neat bun and wore minimal makeup. I wanted to look composed, not threatening. Mark arrived at the mediator's office separately, wearing his power suit, navy blue, custom-tailored with a bold red tie. The confident businessman ready to close another successful deal. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table. His lawyer, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, sat beside him, emanating confidence. Sarah sat beside me, calm and prepared. The mediator, a retired judge in her 60s, explained the process. Mark nodded impatiently, clearly wanting to get to the part where I surrendered. His lawyer spoke first, outlining Mark's generous proposal. The house would be sold, with profits split 60-40 in Mark's favor. I would receive a modest monthly support payment for 2 years. Mark would retain full ownership of the business he had built from the ground up. Throughout the presentation, Mark maintained a smug smile. When his lawyer finished, Mark leaned forward. "I think this is more than fair, considering I'm the one who built our financial security," he said, his tone condescending. "I'm not looking to leave Claire with nothing." Just wallpaper, I thought, remembering his letter to Rachel. The mediator turned to me. "Mrs. Lawson, do you have a counteroffer?" I nodded to Sarah, who calmly slid a thick folder across the table. "Before we discuss numbers," Sarah said, "I think everyone should review this documentation." The folder contained everything. The letters to Rachel, the financial records showing misappropriation of company funds, the offshore account documentation, proof of assets deliberately hidden from divorce proceedings. Mark's lawyer flipped through the pages, his expression changing from confidence to concern to alarm. Mark leaned over to see what had caused the shift. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice losing its smooth edge. "Evidence," Sarah replied simply. The mediator reviewed the documents with professional detachment, but even she couldn't hide her reaction to some of the more damning evidence. "Mr. Lawson," she said finally, "these are serious allegations. If even half of this is accurate, it would significantly impact any court's ruling on asset division." Mark's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Mark's face had drained of color, his smug smile long gone. "These are private writings," he stammered, gesturing to his letters. "This is an invasion of privacy." "Actually," Sarah countered, "they're evidence of intent to defraud in a divorce proceeding, and the financial records are business documents that Mrs. Lawson has legal access to." Mark turned to me, his expression a mix of shock and fury. I met his gaze calmly. "This is everything you thought I'd never see," I said quietly, my first direct words to him in the meeting. His lawyer requested a recess. As they huddled in the corner of the room, I saw the panic in Mark's posture, the rigid shoulders, the nervous gestures. His perfect plan was crumbling. When they returned to the table, his lawyer's tone had completely changed. "Perhaps we should discuss a new arrangement," he suggested. The mediation stretched into the evening. Mark's initial shock turned to desperate bargaining, then to resigned acceptance as Sarah methodically dismantled each of his arguments. In the end, I didn't ask for what most would expect. I didn't want revenge. I wanted security and freedom. I don't want alimony, I stated clearly. I want full legal control of my assets and protection for Emily's inheritance. Mark agreed eagerly, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. The final agreement gave me full ownership of the lake house, which had been in my family, a fair division of our liquid assets, and, most importantly, protection from Mark's financial maneuvers. There's one more clause, Sarah said, sliding the final document across the table. Clause 7. It's non-negotiable. Mark, eager to escape, barely glanced at it before signing. His lawyer started to object but was too late. Mark's signature was already on the page. "What did I just sign?" Mark asked his lawyer, who was reading the clause with a frown. Clause 7 states that for 5 years, Mr. Lawson cannot transfer, sell, or access any joint property or financial asset without Mrs. Lawson's written approval, the mediator read aloud. Mark stared at her in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. How am I supposed to run my business?" "You're not," Sarah said simply. "Claire is." It was the clause that would prevent him from emptying accounts, selling properties from under me, or transferring business assets to Rachel's name, all things his letters had revealed he planned to do. Mark had signed away his financial freedom for 5 years. We left the mediation office separately. I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in months. Not happy, there was too much grief for that, but free. The weight of Mark's betrayal had been balanced, if not erased, by justice. When I arrived home, Mark's car was already in the driveway. I hesitated before entering the main house, wondering if I should go directly to the guest house instead. But I needed to face him one last time. I found him in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in hand, the mediation papers spread across the counter. "You planned this," he said as I entered, his voice tight with fury. "All of it. The silent treatment, the calm act, it was all calculated." "Yes," I admitted, "much like your exit strategy." He slammed his glass down. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I can't access my own money. I can't sell my own property." "Our money," I corrected quietly. "Our property. That's what marriage means, Mark." He laughed bitterly. "Look at you, suddenly the cunning businesswoman. Where was this Claire for the past 20 years? "She was here all along," I replied. "You just never bothered to see her." He swept the papers off the counter in a burst of rage. "You think you've won? Rachel and I." "Rachel left 2 hours ago," I interrupted. "Sarah had her investigator confirm it. She cleaned out her office and resigned, effective immediately." Mark stared at me, shocked into silence. "She wasn't interested in a man with no access to his money," I continued. "Turns out she wanted the same thing you did, a comfortable exit strategy." That night, alone in the guest house, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness, but from release. For weeks, I'd held everything in, showing Mark nothing of my pain or my determination. Now, in private, I could finally acknowledge the enormity of what had happened and what I had done in response. The next morning, I found Mark packing his clothes. "I'm leaving," he announced. "I'll be staying at the Marriott until I find an apartment." I nodded. That seemed sensible. He continued shoving clothes into his suitcase, movements jerky with barely contained anger. "You know what kills me?" he said suddenly, turning to face me. "You didn't fight for us. Not once did you ask me to stay, to reconsider, to try again." The audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. Why would I fight for someone who was planning my replacement for 2 years? I asked finally. "Who called me wallpaper? Who served me divorce papers at our daughter's graduation?" "That's not, I didn't," he stammered. "You didn't think I'd see those letters," I finished for him. "You didn't think I'd find out about Rachel, about the money, about any of it. You thought I was too docile, too trusting, too stupid." "I never said you were stupid," he protested weakly. "No," I agreed. "You just treated me that way." He zipped his suitcase with unnecessary force. "This is what it looks like when you back someone into a corner, Claire." I shook my head. "No, Mark, this is what it looks like when you underestimate someone who loved you." Emily came home the following weekend, after I told her the mediation was complete. "Dad's gone?" she asked, looking around the quieter house. "Yes," I confirmed. "He's found an apartment downtown." We sat in the kitchen. the heart of the home where I'd cooked thousands of family meals. Emily studied me with new eyes. "When I first found out about the divorce, I thought you were letting him win," she said softly. "You were so quiet, so passive. I didn't understand." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know. But you were building a case the whole time," she continued, understanding dawning. "All those times I thought you were just accepting it. You were actually fighting back." "Sometimes the quietest battles are the most important ones," I told her. She smiled, a mix of admiration and lingering sadness in her eyes. "You never struck prematurely. You waited until you had everything you needed." "I learned that from watching you grow up," I said. "Remember your debate competitions? You always said the key was to let your opponent think they were winning, right until they weren't." She laughed, the sound brightening the kitchen. "I never thought my mom would use my debate tactics in a divorce." "Life is full of surprises," I said, smiling back at her. That night, we ordered pizza and watched old movies, just the two of us. The house felt different, emptier but somehow fuller too, as if the absence of tension had created space for something new to grow. News trickled in through mutual friends. Rachel had left Mark and the city. His business was struggling without access to the reserve funds. He'd been calling friends for loans. I felt vindicated. The man who'd dismissed me as wallpaper was discovering how much I had supported his success. I walked through the quiet house each evening, surrounded by ghostly imprints of our 23 years together. His empty chair, his untouched side of the bed, his coffee mug still in the cabinet. With each passing day, the silence felt less like loss and more like possibility. I rearranged furniture, played music Mark had always complained about, cooked meals with flavors he never appreciated. One evening, I found our wedding photo. I carefully wrapped it in tissue paper and boxed it with other mementos. Not erasing the past, but making room for whatever came next. The silence that once felt crushing now felt like a clean slate. Summer turned to fall. I moved to the lake house, the property that had been in my family for generations, now solely mine again. It needed work. Perfect, I thought. A project to pour myself into. I hired contractors for major repairs but did the cosmetic work myself. I painted the walls in colors Mark would have hated, but I loved. Deep blues, sunny yellows, rich emerald green. I replaced heavy curtains with gauzy fabrics that welcomed sunlight. Each nail I hammered felt like a promise. Never again would I make myself smaller for someone else's ego. Never again would I be wallpaper. Emily visited on weekends, helping me renovate. "You seem different, Mom," she observed as we watched the sunset. "More present." I nodded. For years I'd lived half-focused on Mark's needs and moods. Even in my own mind, I'd made myself smaller. "I'm learning to be whole again," I said. "I wasn't just renovating a house. I was rebuilding a life." One autumn evening, Mark showed up at the lake house, thinner, disheveled, defeated. "I made a mistake," he admitted after I let him in. "Rachel's gone. The business is struggling. Nothing's working out like I planned." "I miss what we had," he continued, voice dropping. "The stability, the partnership. I miss you." I felt only clarity where pain once lived. "You don't miss me," I said gently. "You miss who I used to be when you had power over me." He argued people change, suggested starting over. "No," I said simply, "that chapter's closed." At the door he paused. "I really did love you in my way. I know, but I deserve better than your way." I closed the door, listening to his footsteps fade. Spring arrived early. Bulbs I'd planted pushed through the soil, promising new beginnings. I taught art classes now, something I'd loved but set aside for Mark's career. One perfect evening, Emily and I watched the sunset from the deck. "Dad's moving to Chicago," she said. "New job." I nodded, feeling only distant acknowledgement. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked, studying my face. I smiled, realizing she still expected pain. "I'm finally more than okay," I told her, meaning it completely. The lake house glowed behind us, no longer a shelter from storms but a beacon of what I'd built from wreckage. My past had closed. Ahead stretched a future entirely my own, filled with strength I never knew I possessed until forced to find it.